Welcome to episode 228 of the Free to Be Mindful podcast. I hope that you're feeling good, looking good, and doing better in this world than you were yesterday. Our guest today, I say in the episode, when I first saw her website, before I even met her, I was fangirling because it's so good and I had heard such wonderful things about her. And then we got on a call and I was like, oh, you're like meeting a superstar. I really admire her and all she does. So her name is Whitney Faires, and she is an internationally recognized executive coach. She's also a keynote speaker and a leadership expert. She empowers her clients to overcome obstacles, enabling them to reach unthinkable levels of performance with greater fulfillment. And as a former corporate executive, Whitney has developed proven strategies to enable her clients to strengthen their mindsets, improve resilience, and access untapped potential. She's also the creator of an amazing excellence equation, which is her 8-step framework to take professionals from underestimated to unstoppable. Her transformative coaching helps high achievers navigate uncertainty and self-doubt that is often experienced when chasing big goals. And it's very interesting in our conversation, although she comes from this executive background, we tie it into real life conversations. We tie it into motherhood and how sometimes how some of the mindset and then some of the strategies can be the same to help take us to the levels of where we want to get. I truly hope that you enjoy this episode as much as I did recording it. Let's check it out. Whitney, thank you so much for joining today on the Free to Be Mindful podcast. I'm so happy you're here with us.
Thanks, Vanessa. It is a privilege to be here. I'm very excited for today.
Yay. So when I first met you, I told you I was fanning out because I had seen your website before and I was like, this lady has got it going on. Like she is it. So I'm so excited to share you with the audience. And I'd like to give you the space to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit of what you're about.
Yeah, absolutely. So I have spent 20 years in the corporate world, mostly the medical device space, and have had wonderful experiences. In fact, taking this step to launching my own company, it was hard to leave, but I have had this passion for just investing in people. And I love to see people tap into their untapped potential and reach goals that they never thought were possible. And so I made the leap and I am an executive coach and I also do keynote speaking. And it's just so much fun to work with people to help them really take their goals and move them to reality.
Absolutely. And I always like to point that out when people leave a secure, for me, leaving education, it was tenure, pension, benefits, like everything that sounds perfect, where the checks a checkbox. And then all of a sudden you're like, wait, now I have my own business. Now what do I do? And there's a lot of
Yeah.
risk in that. So congratulations. But at the same time, I'm sure there's a lot of reward.
Yeah, I always say I've become convinced that entrepreneurs, at least a lot of us, we have this passion that's almost turned into our purpose. Otherwise, we would just stay in the comfort of our corporate jobs, our previous worlds that we all lived in, and that's how I feel for myself. It's just there's too much value to bring and too many people to impact to just stay in my comfort zone.
You say it so nicely because when you said entrepreneurs are, the first word that came to my mind was crazy. We're crazy to leave
Yes,
something
this is
so
true.
comfortable. But then we work around the clock to make it all happen and really build things from the ground up and serve other people, which is really awesome.
Yeah, yeah.
All right. So when we hear executive coaching, some people may not even understand what does we hear health coach or financial coach. What does executive coach actually mean?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, first of all, I always like to explain coaching that we're all on a journey and our journeys are all unique. And really, coaching is focused on taking where you are today and where you want to go and closing that gap.
Mm.
And so, executive coaching is really a customized development experience for each individual. So, yes, my main focus are people that are professionals and I've done the most work with those who are emerging into leadership roles in their organizations, have taken a big career leap and are trying
Okay.
to really up-level their skills to be ready to be successful and also have fulfillment along the way. And then, of course, like your C-level, VP level executives in organizations. But really, coaching can be for anyone. Some of my clients, for example, they are crushing it in the professional space, but the struggle and the fulfillment is real.
Yep.
They're struggling to be able to do it all. I myself am a working mom. I have two kids, and I look back at when I had, having two kids under two and trying to have a fast-paced corporate career, and it was so hard.
Hard.
And that's actually was one of my driving forces in getting my coaching certification. So, does that answer your question?
It does. So we don't, when we hear executive, we don't have to be a CEO of a big
No.
company to sign up for executive coaching. It could be anyone that wants to take their life from one place to another.
Yes, yes. And I do a lot of mindset work, which is where I think like we have some connections.
Yes.
But I am such a believer, and I've just seen it in years of leading teams and developing people, and then in my coaching practice, where your mindset can be your greatest advocate or your biggest hurdle. And so that's where coaching, I call myself an executive coach because I do tend to work with those at higher professional levels. But I also have, people who are just starting out in their careers that are trying to figure out their way. And so, really, if you have a gap that's clearly identified, that is somewhat mindset, professional, I would be your person. If you're looking for a pure health coach or a life coach, I can get you to somebody that's great.
It's great when we know like exactly where our lane is and what we specialize
Yeah,
in. And yours is totally niche down to where you can help. And it sounds like when you said your mindset, it can make or break you because you can
for sure.
believe that you have these invisible obstacles in the way, sometimes real, but sometimes we make them bigger than what they really are.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that I'm a big believer that I think we all have these silent dreams, these things that like this idea that pops into our head that's like, oh, I love my job, but I wish this, and I wish I could have this and this, or I wish I could start that charity or that foundation on the side. And so often our mindset just shuts that down because our
Right.
immediate thought is like, I can't do that. I don't have
Yeah.
the time. It's too risky. And so that often is where our mindset gets in our way. And so that's why a lot of the work that I do is focused on elevating your self-awareness, being super clear about what's important to you, what are your strengths, what are your opportunities, and then how do you create a pathway to what you want. And for a lot of people, it's not I want to completely change my life. It's, hey, I have this thing I love, and I have, these challenges. Maybe it's me, maybe it's getting to where I want to go. So how do I get to a good spot? And that's the journey. And it's never ending, but my job is to kind of jumpstart you and get you on a path and provide, my expertise to help you along the way.
My heart jumped a little bit because you said it starts with having that self awareness. And in my work too, I also start with that awareness because if you don't understand what's happening internally, whether it be physically, emotionally, mentally, then it's really hard to even push past that boundary and say, what are the things that are possible? So in my three A's, I call it, it definitely starts with the awareness and then acknowledging kind of like, all right, what are the facts? But then also, where can I go? And sometimes we just need a little bit of push and support, which is what I'm thinking the coaching helps with.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. You nailed it. I call in with all my clients, I'm like, self-awareness is a development accelerator.
Yeah.
And whether you're developing personally or professionally, because the journeys are often very parallel. We come in for one thing, and we often realize like you can't disconnect them, you know.
Mm,
But the reason why I call it a development accelerator is when you're willing to either hear the message, when you can fine tune that skill, or just willing to be honest with yourself. Sometimes we have a way of like making it sound the way that we want it to be, but we just got to live in the reality. And so when you can fine tune that skill, it just gives you a whole new perspective of yourself. And guess what? Oftentimes there's a lot of good in that. It's not like we only see the harsh reality. We often see so much good. And so it's super powerful. I think for us both, as individuals and then in what we're striving to do.
absolutely. And the phrase that really stuck out there was the way that we want it to be, whether it's in professional life or whether it's in with our partners, family, friends, and especially in motherhood. We really have this expectation, this picture that we paint that this is the way it should be because this is what I see on social media, or this is what so and
Yeah.
so is doing. And then we set ourselves up for a certain track that may not even be meant for us when we try to stick with the way that we want it to be instead of allowing the what is.
Yeah, absolutely. You said it best.
So how do you exactly, when you work with people, how do you help them get over that hump as far as the mindset and letting go, like embracing that change and then allowing what the track really should, not should be, but like what it is?
Yeah. So good question. And I will say there's not, I don't have like a magic formula that's like, this works
If
every time, just
only.
follow this. I wish I would, I would love to have it answer that easy. But I think the first thing is, really just starting with embracing adversity as opportunity. And I say
Mm,
that because a lot of times adversity, it doesn't have to be something big like we get laid off or, we have some health issue. Adversity is small stuff. Adversity is you're taking your kids to school and you get a text on your phone that's like, "Hey, this critical meeting canceled and sorry, this is getting pushed out for a month." And you're like, "Oh my gosh, like this is kind of an issue." Adversity can be much smaller than that even. And so, but that tends to create a swirl of thinking in our minds.
right.
And then it can drown out our ability to really hear what's happening, hear what we're thinking, and see it for what it is. Right. So I always tell people the first thing I want you to think about is what is your relationship with adversity?
Mm,
And when you know that, then you can think about, are there tweaks I need to make? Maybe not. Like maybe you have a great way of processing that. But when you can see adversity as when I get to the other side of the struggle, there is strength. I feel like people just become so much more calm. They're
right.
like, okay, this is not what I hoped for. And you may even still be frustrated and emotional and all of that. But when you just pause and say, okay, what's happening? I'm going to get to the other side of this, and there's going to be some silver lining in here. I'm going to learn, I'm going to grow. Then it helps people just reframe their mindset to be
Hmm.
more capable in those moments. And so that's a big one that I focus on. The other one is just having them practice the reflection of what's happening in their day-to-day activities. So if I'm going into a meeting at work, I like to have them come out of that meeting and say, hey, like, how did that really go? Right?
Yeah.
What was my inner narrative? And then what happened in the meeting and just jot down some notes. And then what do I think about it? And
Right.
what you'll find is that there's usually like between those three categories, there's some observations. Like I walked out of the meeting and I thought, that was terrible. I prepared so hard. I knew that. And that was terrible because our brain is like jumping in with its inner narrative. And then we walk away and we carry that with us. Whereas the self-awareness comes in where you say like, okay, what did I say to myself? What actually happened? Again, the what is critical. And
Hmm.
then and then how do I feel about it? Well, what actually happened was I got one objection in that meeting, one question
Right.
that I didn't nail, but honestly, it went great. I even got the outcome I wanted. And so then you can start to see the patterns of where your inner narrative and where self-awareness can come together to really work together more effectively. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. No, it totally, totally does. Going back to the first thing you mentioned, and you gave the example of like online picking up your kids. And sometimes I call it the red carpet line because it can just go on and on and on. And depending if
Yes.
your kids are younger, it takes typically longer to like get them out of the car. And it reminded me of a year or two ago. It was like an episode straight out of Seinfeld where I was backing up into a parking spot and a mom was going into a parking spot and she like got out of the car and yelling and this was mine and it for a second like I felt the blood boiling because I'm like, are you kidding? The lighter is on, I am backing into the car, how are you going to pull into the into the spot? And instead I had the self-awareness and exactly what you were mentioning of, you know what, I'm going to let this go because this little thing is not, I'm not going to create a show in front of my child's school. For what? I'm just going to move up a little bit and find a better parking spot and call it a day. And having that awareness and the realization of like what actually is happening here so that you don't blow it out of proportion is key, which goes into the second piece that you mentioned as far as understanding what your narrative was that you said. Those were the words
Mhm.
that you used.
Yeah. Yeah, your
And
inner
when you
narrative is what I call it.
your inner narrative. I love that you use that phrase because sometimes, like you said, we go into that meeting and then we let other people's opinions or other people's kind of like thoughts of like, oh my goodness, could you believe? And all of a sudden we blow it out of proportion. When, if we stick to the silver linings, if we really look at the facts, it usually isn't as bad as then sometimes our imagination blows it up to be.
Yeah, yeah. It is so true that there is this weird connection between our narrative, our self-awareness, and then that really ties to our success and our fulfillment, both of
Mhm.
them, right? Because if you think about it, it doesn't matter if it's work or life when I say
Right.
success. What I mean is like if we have this misperception of ourselves because our awareness is off, because instead of really seeing what's actually happening, we're just feeling that what our inner narrative is telling us, then we could be working on the wrong things, right?
Right.
We take the wrong approach. Like we think, oh, we're being this way and this isn't working, so I'm going to shift gears, and you shift to a lesser strategy or approach. And so that's where I say, like, a lot of times people go, well, why would I need coaching? And the
Mm.
reality is that I think a lot of the work that I do with my clients is really that deeper work. It's nothing like therapy in the sense that, you're really digging in deeper with the mind, right? But it's more helping them really start to get levity over how they're thinking, acting, and being in a way that they can then become have the power to really diagnose like every situation quickly in the moment and be able to pivot or be able to celebrate the wins, versus it kind of all just being a mixture of, you know, this is what I'm thinking, this is what I'm feeling, this is the feedback I got. Like, what do I do with all that?
Yeah, I think about it almost as like being not quite in a fog, but more like in a washing machine, kind of like
Yes,
the
it's a
spin
great
cycle
example.
where everything's going around and you're like, wait, like where is that one sock that I'm looking for, right? It's all like lost within there. And I imagining, as you said, like it's not just success at work, it's success in life and transitioning into the conversation of motherhood. We see that with our kids too, because sometimes we have, again, like that expectation of what it should be. Or it when our kid is like losing it because a banana broke, let's say, if you have a toddler, or if you have a perfectionistic middle schooler like I do, and like, that 90 wasn't that 99 that he was expecting. Where do you find yourself? And then how do you respond to that? Do you find that your executive coaching skills also work well in the mothering umbrella?
Oh, for sure. If anything, it forces me to up level my skills because it's way easier to coach an adult than it is a child.
Isn't
But,
it?
I will tell you a quick example. My daughter, I think when she was 8, she's 9 now. She would be mortified if she knows telling this story. But, we were reading one night before bed, and she said to me, she said, "Mom, do you ever like hear these thoughts in your head that
Wow.
you're just like, like I wonder if that's true, or why am I thinking this?" And I said, "Well, tell me more," right? Because I'm
Yeah.
thinking, I mean, I want to
Such
know what kind of
awareness.
thoughts. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And so she said, sometimes when I raise my hand at school, I don't get called on, I think, like, does the teacher not think I know the answer? Or
Mm.
sometimes when I give an answer, I wonder if it was really something I should have shared. Was it right? Was it valuable? Sometimes when I try something really hard and I don't do well, I wonder if I should have tried it, or I hear like that's not good enough.
Mhm.
And, honestly, as a mother, I almost started crying because
Yeah.
I thought to myself, here's this kid that is crushes it at school, is such a kind, good kid. She does well, whatever she applies herself to. And she's thinking this. And my husband and I go to great extents to build confident, resilient, great
Mm.
people. And it dawned on me how early this sets in, that it
Yeah.
is something that we almost, because of our because of who we are and what we're exposed to in life, we can't escape it. And so we talk about it openly. And I ask her to think about, hey, when you have these thoughts, I think the question you have to ask yourself is, do I think they're true? When I
Right.
raise my hand and I don't get called on, like, do I really think it's true that my teacher doesn't think I'm smart enough? And
Mhm.
and so we have this open dialogue about it. But point is, I find it super impactful to be able to just, I don't, openly say, let's do some coaching, right? But to be able to apply the skills to anybody.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And what awareness that she has at the age of 8 and 9 years old. And for a second, I was like, wait, does she live in my head? Because sometimes I ask those questions of myself too. Because
We
would
all
you
do.
say they're absolutely natural, right? We all do. There's sometimes like that little self doubt kind of whispering in our ear. But I love how you took it and then what do we know to be true? And I do
Mhm.
the same thing in the therapy room, like show me the proof. Where do we see, like, is that
Yeah.
really true or is that little voice? And when there is no proof and when you cannot prove that it is absolutely true, then how do we shift that mindset? What can we think instead of that first thought in order to, get the outcome that we're really looking for, or to kind of let things go, let that thought go and kind of acknowledge it like, oh, I had a little self-doubt there. Self-doubt. Okay, got it. Now I'm going to move on so that we don't become that, so that we don't live in that
Yeah.
space. It was just something that we visited and flew over.
Yeah, yeah, I love that. That's a great question. What's the proof? Because sometimes our mind tells us really great things and they're real and we don't want to hear them, but we have to. And other times it tells
Yeah.
us things that we're like, this is just the our emotions creeping in. And I think I always say, especially with adversity or any sort of mindset stuff, I don't when I comment on emotions, it's not that I think we should push them aside.
Right.
I think at times sometimes they cloud our thinking. So it's like, okay, we identify the emotions, we call them what they are, we park them for just a second, and then we go over here and we say, what's the reality? I
Right.
mean, what was the feedback I actually got? What really happened in that interaction with my partner and I? And then you can revisit the emotions because sometimes that big emotion, it just doesn't feel quite as big when you're able to just get a little bit more objective about it. If
Mm-hmm.
I that's the
Mm-hmm.
right way to say it.
Absolutely. Yes. When you can see it from a different angle and just see it for what it is without like all of the feelings attached to the feelings. I know that sounds weird, but hopefully that makes
Yeah,
sense. Then we
totally.
can look at it, a little bit more clearly and make better decisions instead of again getting caught up in our feelings, to put it
Yeah,
simply.
yeah.
Yeah. So all of these things that you have going on from, your corporate career and then doing the coaching and having busy, home life, how do you take care of you? Because I'm imagining that as we said, it's normal. It can happen to you too.
Oh yeah, someone told me a long time ago. It was a high level leader in our company. He was speaking at our sales meeting, and he was commenting on how a lot of people struggle with work life balance, and he said, I want you to think differently. That you own your work life balance. You are the
Mm,
only person that can make it better or make it worse, and we want
yes.
you to be empowered to stand up and say, hey, I can't do this, but here is an alternative, or let's think through an alternative. And I'll be honest, when I heard this has got to be 15 years ago, I thought to myself, that's kind of a cop out. But what I've learned is it is true. Is that, when the ask comes of me to do something that pushes me over the edge, there is likely an alternative that I could suggest.
Mm,
There's a timeline I could negotiate. There's something I could deliver on
right.
that timeline with a, hey, but if you want this, I can give it to you then.
Right.
And that's both in personal and professional. And we're people pleasers, a lot of us. We want people to like us and be happy with us and not create unnecessary conflict. But through that comes us, the cost that we suffer from always saying yes. And so I first of all, I have a very small list of non-negotiables, and those
Okay.
are this. The first thing is I get up super early in the morning. I'm a morning person. I always work out, even if I only get 4 hours sleep. It is one thing that I need for me to be at my best.
Okay.
I don't recommend 4 hours sleep, just for the record, but
Not good, not
that's
good. But the
not
working out
common.
part.
Yeah, that's not common anymore. So I don't endorse it. But I get up, I work out. I like to cold plunge. I have a cold plunge in my basement. That's
Nice.
like great for my body, my mindset. And then I spend the morning getting my kids ready for school. I take them to school unless I'm traveling. And in the evenings, I'm out of my office by 6. And
Mm,
I can't do it every single time. But but there are some small non-negotiables where I can take care of myself and I can be around for my family.
yeah.
And I know that some people might say 6, that's really late, but as an entrepreneur and also coming from an intense corporate job, that's sometimes what it takes. But I do
Right.
have flexibility to kind of pop in and pop out if
Throughout the
needed
day.
to take care of other things. Yeah. So there's that. And then there's other things such as, allocating time for my husband and I to just be us and do something. I live close to my family, so I like to be able to see them at least, once a week and spend some time with them. But I have a small list of non-negotiables. And then I really work hard to prioritize everything I need to do daily. So I have a short list. I end my day creating my short list and I start my next day reviewing that and saying, like, okay, this is really that important, or this can wait, to try to make sure that I spend my time wisely so I feel good about what I've accomplished. And then I also am holding myself accountable to not setting myself up for failure, right? Where I'm taking on 8 things, I'm frazzled all day long, and then I get to the end of the day and I say, I only did 2 of them. Like, what? Why? And you walk out of the day feeling just
Yeah, not
like you've
successful.
missed, right?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
those are kind of my keys, but I will tell you, it is completely unrealistic to think that there's a formula that works forever. We are
Right.
dynamic people. Our lives, our careers, everything is dynamic. So what I have learned is you have to check in with yourself when you're feeling that pull, where it's like I'm running ragged. Then you got to stop and really assess. And there are going to be moments where you have to push through all of that, and it's just where you're at.
Right.
That's okay. But you also have to offset that at some point. And one thing I found to be very helpful is, I kind of have 1 or 2 people in my life, my husband, a mentor, that will call out when I'm starting to hit that point where they start to see the
Okay.
changes in me. And they'll say, hey, Whitney, like, you seem like you're really pushing it too hard. Just saying, just take the point of feedback, do what you want. But sometimes when we're really in the thick of it, we can't see it
It's tough to see
until
it. Yeah.
we're like too far gone. We're
Yep.
already just very frazzled.
Yeah, I love all the things that you mentioned that I want to pull apart two important things for listeners and viewers. And the first is the least important one. Actually, I'm going to save the best for last, but I like the way that you said almost have realistic expectations of yourself. Anytime that we're going to approach a new project, even as simple as like, I want to lose those last 5 pounds, or I want to work on this with my kid and have them, off potty training or, onto potty training or whatever it is, we want to like do things from one day to the next or wave that magic wand that just doesn't exist. So having realistic expectations so that you don't overwhelm yourself, and instead of doing those 8 things like you mentioned, just put 4 so that you can get those 4 done and feel better about yourself at the end of the day instead of feeling like you're always running the catch up game. So that's something that
Yeah.
really stood out to me. And then saving the best for last is taking care of ourselves. And so often, as leaders, as type A, as people who want to be successful, and especially as moms, we do all the things for everyone else and we leave ourselves for last. And I love that you're prioritizing yourself of making sure you get that workout in because you know that works for you. The plunge and then everything else that you do, you're prioritizing yourself so you can be the best mom, then prioritizing your kids and the most important things for that day. So that at the end of the day, I hope, it truly is my hope, that everyone goes to bed and can think of, okay, these were 3 things that, I feel great about, that I'm so grateful for, and maybe 1 or 2 things that we can pick up tomorrow. And if we don't, then we don't, but at least like we're taken care of and our loved ones are taken care of. So I'm so
Yeah.
thankful that you definitely highlighted that for our listeners and viewers.
One thing I'd also say is a lot of people, and I experience this, and I've seen this with many other people. We, at least for me, my work life balance was almost worse before I had kids because I
Mm.
always felt like I should say yes to this because, oh, this person that I work with or this friend, they're taking care of sick parents, or they have young kids, and so, well, I don't have anything I have to do tonight. But the reality is work life balance and that self preservation is just as important when you're solo.
Yes.
And there's other things that you probably could do that you would enjoy more than working or saying yes to everything that's asked of you by a friend or a family member. And so I would just say, we all, despite our situations, have to check that very frequently.
Absolutely. I always remind myself just because you can doesn't mean that you should.
That's right. You got to watch the shoulds for sure.
Yes, and not shit on yourself
Right. Right.
as much as we can help. And Whitney, if I were to ask you if you could be remembered for one thing in life, what would that thing be?
Oh, that is such a good question. Um, I would say, without a doubt, it is helping people reach their next level of success and fulfillment.
Mm.
I had this moment where my second job, and I will spare you the whole story, but I was highly underqualified. To the point within the first couple months, I was going to quit, and I thought I've made a mistake. And I had this mentor that I engaged to help me, and it completely transformed me personally and professionally. Changed my view of myself, changed my career trajectory. It did so much for me as a person. And oftentimes the success, that's not about the accomplishment. It's about what
Mhm.
it does to us as individuals and
Right.
how it inspires us and changes us. And so it's really my purpose for doing this work.
Oh, so beautiful. And I know that you're doing it because you have the social proof to back you up. But now I want people, listeners and viewers, if they want the actual proof to go get it and work with you, where can they find you?
Yeah, you can go to my website, whitneyfaires.com. Its last name is Faires because everyone spells it a million different ways. But I will shoot over a link, and I would love to offer any listeners a 30-minute discovery call if they are considering coaching or if they just want to learn about it. I know that everyone has a different journey and has a lot of questions, so I'd be happy to engage in allowing them to explore that in any way that meets their needs.
So awesome. Thank you so much for that information. And we'll be sure to
Yeah.
include it in the show notes so that people don't misspell the last name and go exactly to where they need to go. Thank you so much for your time today. And I am so grateful for the work that you're doing in the world because we really do need it.
Oh, thank you so much for your partnership and collaboration. I'm so glad our paths crossed.
Thank you, Whitney, once again for your time, for your stories, and for your inspiration. For today's guided meditation, I'd like for you to think about what is it that brings you joy, that truly brings you joy? What is it that sometimes you set aside because your family, your job, your kids need more of you? For me, it's salsa dancing. Think about what it is for you. Think about what it is that you enjoy and how you can bring more of that in your life. May not happen every day, may not happen every week, but even if you set aside time at least once a month to put everything aside, to bring yourself more joy in doing this thing that revitalizes you, it is in that way that you feel more balanced. There truly is no exact work life balance that'll leave you at a 50-50. The scales are always moving as life just happens. But we do want to integrate things that bring us joy so that we continue to feel more of ourselves. And with that confidence, we can use to overcome adversity, to feel more confident in what we're doing, to better help those who we love. My friends, thank you so much for tuning in. And as always, remember, in a world where you are free to be anything that you want to be, you are always free to be mindful. Catch you next time. I hope you enjoyed this week's show. It would mean a ton if you took this moment to review the Free to Be Mindful podcast on the platform you catch your favorite shows. That quick and easy act lets me know what you enjoy, and it helps others find the podcast too. And of course, don't forget to subscribe so you can listen along next week. In the meantime, I welcome you to catch me on social media at Counselor V De Jesus. And as always, remember, in a world where you are free to be anything that you want to be, you are always free to be mindful. Catch you next week.